Well, Firehouse Subs in Monroe hosting a 9/11 ceremony today. Gabby Ballou was there.
We pray for family members, oh God, that are still traumatized and hurt and suffer because of the tragedy. But at the same time,
23 years ago, almost 3,000 people's lives were taken due to the 9/11 attacks. Eugene Whitney, regional manager of Firehouse Subs in Monroe, says the ceremony was a way to remember first responders and others who lost their lives.
It's always best to remember the ones that sacrificed their life for us.
First responders from Acadian Ambulance, Monroe Fire, Washita Sheriff's Office, and Monroe Marshal's Office came along with Councilman Rodney McFarland and Representative Adrian Fisher and other members of the community to take part in the ceremony. Councilman Rodney McFarland serves in Monroe's District 4, and he says he's thankful for Firehouse Subs for their community involvement, especially on a day that is remembered by many.
So we just thank God for the vision of Mr. Whitney desiring to do something for the first responders here in the Monroe area.
The first responders were able to stay and eat a free meal, but some even left to respond to emergency calls during the ceremony. Councilman McFarland reflects on their dedication to the community.
Although they was here to be honored, they had to stop everything to go out on an emergency call. We need to make sure that we appreciate our first responders each and every time that we run across them.
Jamie Mays, the owner of a nonprofit called The Healing Project, helped with today's program. She says she remembers being a freshman at LSU and seeing many reactions to the news reports of the attacks.
I definitely remember seeing people crying in the lobby of our dorms and them having family members who did go to help. Because they were first responders.
Mays also wrote a spoken word piece to reflect on her experience with learning about the attacks at such a young age. Here's one part of her spoken word piece called How Could I Forget?
Majestic pillars with windows that danced in the sunlight, reflecting God's majestic work against the backdrop of beautiful blue skies. Down they tumbled so quickly, changing the landscape of the city and the face of our nation right before our very eyes.
In Monroe, I'm Gabby Ballou with KNOE 8 News.